Next item on the agenda, the purchase of the Gander property next door. Now, Vern Gander is here with us today. Vern?
Thanks, Jim. As you know, my sister Susan, who owned the house next door, has been missing for 2 years now. Recently, a judge declared her legally dead, meaning that the property is passed to me. I know that the library has been looking to expand its children's section.
Vern has offered to sell us the property for substantially less than its assessed value. The plan would be to demolish the house to make way for a new children's wing.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity you've offered us, Vern.
Thank you, Jessica. I know it's what she would have wanted.
Any further comments from the board before we take a vote?
I still think that the money would be better spent on a new roof.
Let's take a vote. All in favor of purchasing the Gander property?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
The motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Gander.
Jessica, may I have a word?
Of course.
Look, it's no secret that my sister and I did not get along. Still, I'd give anything to know what happened to her. I know the answer's in her house somewhere, but I'm running out of time before the place is demolished. I was hoping you could help.
All right, Vern. I'll take a look around, but I'm not making any promises about finding any answers.
I understand. Oh, by the way, Susan used to talk about some treasure she had hidden in her house. I chalked it up to her paranoid delusions, but you might want to keep that in mind.
Well, I'll do my best. I'll probably do some background research on her disappearance first.
Thanks. Feel free to drop by my hardware store if you come up with anything.
Did you know Susan Gander, Mrs. F?
Not really. We were scarcely acquaintances.
Then maybe we should take a moment to see what we can find out about her here in the library.
They have some archived copies of the Cabot Cove Independent, but their filing system is atrocious. It may take a little time to find the reels.
We better get started then.
reminiscing about Susan, are we? I do that a lot myself.
Hello, Morris. We found your engagement announcement in the archives.
Yes, Susan and I were planning to get married. We met here at the library, and we got along very well. Not a day goes by that I don't miss her.
When did you learn she was missing?
Right after her brother Vern filed the missing persons report.
It must be very difficult for you, not knowing what happened to her.
Indeed, it has been. But, as they say, life goes on.
Vern gave me the keys to Susan's house to have a look around. I'm going to head over there now. It's a shame that a house as beautiful as this was allowed to fall into such disrepair. Well, first things first. Let's try and shed some light on things. Chris's antique shop is right next door. I think I'll drop by and see what he knows about this inventory list.
Hello, Jessica. Shopping for an antique today?
I'm afraid not, Chris.
I heard that the library bought the house next door. Any idea when it will be demolished?
I don't know yet. Speaking of the house, I was just over there on Vern's behalf and found a list you made.
That old inventory list? Where did you find it?
In Susan's living room. Do you remember when you made it?
Shortly before Susan disappeared. With her approval, naturally. She wanted an inventory done before she sold the property to William Forrest. Before the deal fell apart, that is.
Of course. Did you get along with Susan?
To be perfectly honest, no. Susan's house was an eyesore, even before it stood empty. And that hurt my business.
How so?
Well, in nice surroundings, old things look like antiques. In not-so-nice surroundings, old things look like junk. Plus, she kept promising that she'd sell me her furniture and then changing her mind.
I heard that Susan claimed to have had some kind of treasure hidden in the house. Did you know about that?
No. I was more interested in the treasure Susan had in plain sight, the furnishings. I was hopeful that if William decided not to buy the house, she might sell it to me. That's why William shared the findings from his inspection with me.
I see. One last question, Chris. Do you smoke?
I used to, but I quit about a year ago.
Mind if I ask what brand?
Westminster's?
Chris, these tiles I found in your store, they look like they came from the fireplace in Susan's house.
They did. Before she disappeared, Susan sold me a few tiles. She said she was getting ready to tear down the old fireplace to put a new one in.
You've had them all this time? Why didn't you put them up for sale?
I was hopeful that someday I'd get the rest. Then I could sell them all as a complete set, for a lot more money. Pardon me, I have a customer waiting.
I probably should talk with the other person who had a strong interest in Susan's home, William Forrest. William, is this a bad time?
Not at all, Jessica.
I stopped by Coveside Antiques earlier and found the home inspection report you had done on Susan Gander's property.
If you're thinking of using that to go by once the library owns the property, I wouldn't. 2 years' time has left it in even worse shape than when I had that done.
I noticed that the report was written shortly before Susan disappeared.
Yes, I was negotiating with her to purchase the property for development. It's a prime in-town lot.
I saw that one of the things you noted was that the fireplace was in disrepair. Now, how could this be when it's bricked up?
I can only assume that Susan bricked it up after she saw the report to address my concerns.
So why did the deal fall through?
I have no idea. The morning we were supposed to sign the papers, Susan changed her mind and backed out without any explanation.
I see. I don't suppose you smoke at all, do you?
I like to indulge in a nice cigar when celebrating a successful deal. Say, Jessica, can I show you some of the new model homes I'm building here in Cabot Cove?
Most certainly. Well, William certainly seems to be on the up and up. Perhaps Vern knows more about why Susan canceled the sale of her property to William.
Jessica, any news?
No, not yet, Vern. But I do have a couple of questions. Did your sister smoke?
Like a chimney. She was always smoking those Westminsters. I could never stand the smell of cigarette smoke myself. That was one excuse I had for staying away.
There were 2 brands of cigarette butts that I found in her house. Now, assuming that the Westminsters were Susan's, I wonder who the second brand belonged to.
I haven't the foggiest idea.
I was also wondering about the deal to sell her property to William Forrest. Do you remember when exactly she changed her mind?
Just a few days before she disappeared. I remember she sent me a letter about it. I'm sure I have it around here somewhere.
Vern, I found this picture of your sister.
Oh, I forgot. It came with the letter Susan sent me.
She's standing in front of her bookcases in her living room. Who do you suppose took it?
Well, since she rarely let other people take a picture, I bet she took it herself. Photography was one of her hobbies.
If that's the case, Susan might be trying to tell us something. I should have another look around her house. Based on that photo, it looks like Susan was standing here in the living room over by those bookshelves. I'll have all this film delivered to Vern's hardware. I hope that Vern will be able to recognize something in the photos. Vern, did the photos happen to arrive yet?
They did, but a customer left the door open and the wind scattered them everywhere.
Oh dear. Let me help you gather them up.
Thanks, Jessica. Do any stand out to you?
The date stamp shows that this was taken just a few days before your sister disappeared.
See the way she's standing? It's like she's pointing down at something.
Yes, but there's nothing in the foreground to indicate what she's pointing at. About the fireplace. It's not bricked up in the photo, but it is now. When exactly was that done?
I don't recall. Susan never used the fireplace. She was tight with money, and she always said that too much heat was lost up the chimney with fireplaces.
So she bricked it up to fight the draft?
That's what I assumed.
Since the fireplace isn't bricked up in the photo, and Susan disappeared just a few days later, it's likely it was bricked up at or after the time of her disappearance. Sheriff, I'm dreadfully afraid I know what we'll find when we break down those bricks.
Oh my God!
It's impossible to say who it is, but the smart money's on Susan Gander.
So she never did leave town. She's been in here the whole time.
I'm afraid so, Vern.
There's damage to the skull. Looks like blunt force trauma. We got ourselves a crime scene now.
Hey, it's fine with me. As soon as the ink's dry on the contract, you can take out whatever you want. The furniture, building materials, everything.
I can't even guess at the value of all that. The chandelier is probably worth a couple grand all by itself.
Do you already have someone interested in this stuff?
A contractor down in Portland already offered to buy whatever I can recover before you tear it down.
Well, you're both welcome to it.
What are you doing with the land?
I've got plans for some high-end condos. They'll sell like hotcakes. I'm in it pretty deep now, but I figure I'll have my investment back in less than 2 years.
To our good fortune.
The date stamp on the videotape shows it was recorded 6 days before Susan disappeared.
I doubt that William was aware that Susan was taping his conversation with Chris.
Yeah, but he's about to find out all about it.
Sheriff, Jessica, what can I do for you?
We found Susan Gander's body, William, bricked up in the fireplace in her home.
That's interesting, but why are you telling me this?
Because we also know that Susan videotaped you conspiring with Chris Lamar, and maybe that has something to do with how she ended up in that fireplace.
There is nothing illegal about making an informal agreement in anticipation of a property sale.
There is if you do something illegal to make that informal agreement happen.
That tape provides a pretty convincing motive for murder, Mr. Forrest. You told Chris you were in pretty deep when Susan backed out of selling her house. It must have been a serious setback for you.
Oh, I didn't actually have much invested in the project. I just said that to Chris so he'd stop competing with me to get the property for himself. I didn't want to get into a bidding war and drive up the price. Besides, I have plenty of lucrative projects in the works now. Chris Lamar, on the other hand.
What about Chris?
He really needed the money he could have gotten for selling the materials from Susan's house. His antiques business has been struggling ever since the deal fell apart.
That candlestick looks very familiar, William. May I ask where it came from?
I bought it from Chris's antique shop.
It looks just like the ones in the photograph of Susan's mantelpiece.
We're going to need to borrow it.
Be my guest.
If Chris sold the candlestick to William, how did Chris come to have it in the first place?
Let's have a chat with him and ask him now.
Chris, I don't know if you've heard, but Susan Gander's body has been found.
After all this time? Where was it?
Bricked up in her fireplace. She obviously never left home.
Well, at least now Vern can have some closure. I'm really sorry, but I just don't have time to chat. I need to clear my shelves for a new shipment arriving.
Oh, I'd be more than happy to lend a hand.
Mr. Lamar, is it true that you made an agreement with William Forrest to harvest materials from Susan's house once it was sold?
I vaguely remember a conversation like that.
And according to Mr. Forrest, business hasn't been so good for you since that deal fell through.
It's true that my business selling historic building materials is all but gone, but I've been able to ride things out by selling knickknacks to tourists.
Susan's decision to cancel the sale really hurt your bottom line. Revenge sounds like a possible motive for murder to me.
I had absolutely nothing to do with Susan's murder. Ever since she disappeared, the house has been in legal limbo. I would have had a better chance of eventually cashing in on the materials if she'd remained alive.
Did you ever sell a silver candlestick to William?
I believe so. It was part of a pair that someone sold me a couple of years back.
Do you remember who that was?
No, but I could probably sort through my files and find out.
Do you recall seeing anyone coming and going on a regular basis next door?
Well, Morris Niederhammer seemed to visit Susan quite frequently.
Maybe Morris knows something about Susan's supposed hidden treasure. He's probably at the library now. Morris, I was hoping I'd find you here. You should know that Susan's body has been found.
Found where?
Well, I know this may be difficult for you to hear. She was murdered at home and her body hidden in the bricked-up fireplace.
Oh, God. She was here all the time?
I'm so sorry, Morris, but may I ask you a question?
Well, certainly.
There is an old rumor that Susan had a hidden treasure somewhere in her house. Did you ever hear about that?
I did. From Susan herself, in fact. I must admit I had my doubts about its existence.
Why is that?
Well, for one thing, she never showed me where it was.
And William Forrest and Chris Lamar, did they know about this rumor as well?
I imagine they'd heard it, but not from Susan. She didn't talk about it much with people she didn't trust.
Shortly before she disappeared, Susan sent this letter to her brother Vern. If there never was any treasure, what is she referring to?
I suppose it was the value of her real estate.
Are these your ultra-gold cigarettes, Morris?
Looks like you've discovered my dirty little secret.
You know, the sheriff found some ultra-gold cigarette butts at Susan's house.
Well, I suppose I ought to tell you I was there with her the night before she disappeared. We were having an argument.
I'm sorry.
Oh, don't be. It was always a stormy relationship. Susan was having second thoughts about the wedding. We decided we needed time to cool off. So I went home. When she turned up missing, I thought she'd run off to be by herself to think. When she never came home, well, I was utterly devastated.
That's a terribly sad story, Morris. Is there anyone you know of who had reason to harm Susan?
I always suspected William. He'd invested so much in his condo project, so her refusal to follow through was quite a blow to him. And then there was Susan's letter.
You mean the letter I found that Susan wrote to William?
Yes, Susan overheard William on the phone bribing some official to get his building permits fast-tracked for approval. She later sent him that letter telling him what she knew, in hopes he would give her a better deal. She even told him she'd given another letter to someone else for safekeeping.
And that someone was you?
Yes, I've kept it all these years.
But Morris, why didn't you produce the letter when Susan went missing?
To be honest, Jessica, I was scared. If William found out I knew about the bribery scandal too, he'd come after me next. My name's on the letter, so I couldn't even turn it in anonymously.
This new information certainly raises questions about William's involvement in Susan's murder. William, I wanted to ask you about this letter. Susan accuses you of bribing the head of the town zoning committee. Is that true?
There is nothing illegal about making a financial gift to a friend. Susan got wind of it and tried to blackmail me by demanding I pay her double for the property.
Did you kill her over it?
No, I wasn't afraid of her. Sure, I wanted her property, but I didn't have the capital or the inclination to pay twice what it was worth.
So that's why the deal fell through.
Exactly. She may have told everyone that she was the one who backed out of the deal, but what she was demanding was completely unreasonable.
Were you aware of the rumor about the treasure Susan allegedly had hidden in her house?
No, and there certainly were no signs of any sort of treasure when I had the house surveyed. I did notice some things missing, though, like her crystal glassware collection and a few of those ceramic tiles from above the fireplace.
William, can you tell me about this model?
That's the development I was going to build. Getting it started all hinged on Susan's property. I hung on to it hoping Vern might still decide to sell the real estate to me, but I guess there's no reason to keep it now that the library is purchasing the land.
Certainly looks like a very ambitious project. You must have spent quite a bit on all these plans.
Well, perhaps I downplayed my investment a bit before. I didn't want to seem foolish for diving in before everything was signed, but I do know Vern was seriously considering my offer. I'll need to take this. Excuse me, please.
It seems likely that William was in so deep on this deal that he couldn't meet the demands of Susan's blackmail attempt. But could he have been angry enough about it to commit murder? Maybe Vern can provide some insight. Vern, I was just talking to William Forrest. He showed me a model of the project he hoped to build on Susan's property that he kept in hopes you would sell the house to him.
William did make me an offer to buy the place when Susan was declared dead, but after thinking it over, I knew that selling it to the library is what she really would have wanted.
About the treasure Susan mentioned, Morris suggested that by treasure she meant the value of the property.
Maybe, I'm not really sure. The property certainly is valuable, but so are the materials used in the house. It dates back to the early 19th century.
That's very impressive. How did you learn this?
I think it was in one of the letters I received about Susan's house recently. I'm sure it's around here somewhere.
This letter was from Chris Lamar. Is he the one who told you about the value of the building materials?
Yes. He approached me about buying the property, or at least the rights to deconstruct the house and remove anything that could be reused.
With so much interest in Susan's house, I'd better check it first thing in the morning to make sure nothing has been disturbed. That's odd. The front door was unlocked. It's not like the sheriff to leave a crime scene unsecured. I'd best call him. I think someone else may have been here last night. What do you see, Sheriff?
There's some fresh damage here by the fireplace, like someone hastily used some tools to remove something.
There's only one person I know with an interest in getting as much out of this house as possible before it's demolished. Chris Lamar.
Let's head over to the antique shop now.
What brings you two back?
How long have you been plundering items out of Susan's empty house?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Susan's collection of antique crystal is missing. And those tiles you have here, they're identical to the ones missing from around Susan's fireplace.
All right, you win. I've been taking stuff out of the house and selling it to keep the shop afloat. No one's lived there for 2 years now. Why should valuable materials just sit there to rot?
Is that how you came by the candlestick you sold to William Forrest?
No, I found the bill of sale from when I purchased the set a year ago.
According to the document, you bought the candlesticks from Morris Niederhammer, along with several other items.
Do you still have the other candlestick from the set?
I don't remember selling it to anyone, so it must be around here somewhere.
We'll need to take that candlestick for our investigation, Mr. Lamar.
Go ahead.
I have a feeling that either this candlestick or the one William had may be the weapon used to murder Susan.
I'll bring both down to the station to have them check for traces.
Once we know for sure, I promise to let Vern know. Vern, do you have a moment?
I'm sorry, Jessica, but Jack Delgado has an emergency on his hands and needs all the saws I can pull together. Something about some trees down by the school?
Let me lend you a hand with that. We have news, Vern. We found the murder weapon that killed your sister.
You have? What was it?
This antique silver candlestick we found for sale in Chris Lamar's shop. There was a trace of Susan's blood on the base.
How about fingerprints?
The candlestick has been handled so many times by Chris and customers examining it that it was impossible to tell if it ever had the murderer's fingerprints on it.
Hold on. Do you still have that candlestick?
Sure.
There's a tricky way to open them up. Supposed to be for easy cleaning. Maybe there's something inside.
Vern, you told me earlier that Susan smoked Westminsters?
That's right.
Then the person who smoked the Ultra Golds is likely her murderer. Morris, excuse me a moment.
Yes, Jessica?
We got a hunch that someone may have hidden Susan's collection of crystal nearby.
What? I don't see how that would be possible. You're welcome to have a look, though.
Morris, I'm afraid we need to talk.
Talk? About what?
About how you killed Susan Gander 2 years ago. The crystal you've hidden here confirms it.
What? I loved her. We were going to be married.
You used one of Susan's candlesticks to bludgeon her to death. The same one you dropped one of your cigarette butts in. Afterwards, you burned Susan's remains. But you didn't think to burn the cigarette butts that proved you were there.
You took both candlesticks away with you and later sold the pair to Chris Lamar. You intended to sell off the crystal too, but never had the chance.
You lied when you said that you left the house after you argued over your engagement, didn't you, Morris?
Yes, I did. You see, I knew that Susan wasn't making up the story about the treasure in her house. We met here, at the library, and she told me all about it. It was worth a fortune. I never had much money my whole life. Anyway, I became close to her and convinced her to marry me. But she never trusted me enough to tell me where the treasure was hidden.
What happened the night of the argument?
I'd pressed Susan to tell me the location of the treasure. That was a mistake. It roused her suspicions, and she called off the relationship. She even threatened to go to the police and have me charged with fraud for tricking her into marrying me. I couldn't let her do that.
So you kept her quiet with a candlestick to the head.
I was in such a fury. I didn't know what I was doing. Afterwards, I was horrified at what I'd done. I had to hide her.
Is that when you decided to try and burn her remains?
It seemed like the safest thing to do. And to make it look like she had left town, I collected some of her belongings and threw those into the fire as well. Then I bricked up the fireplace so no one would find out what I had done.
And the treasure, did you ever find it?
No. As far as I know, it's still in that house. Somewhere. But after what I'd done, I never set foot in there again.
Sheriff, I keep thinking about that picture of Susan and the way she's standing. What if she's trying to tell us something? Let's see. In the photograph, Susan is standing approximately here.
She's pointing at the floor, here.
Right. But what if she's trying to indicate an area of bricks in the fireplace, and not something in the foreground?
The mortar has been chipped away on these bricks.
It looks like Susan had her life savings hidden here.
Yeah, and when Morris here burned her body, the heat from the fire must have ignited the bills and burned them right inside the box.
My greed made me do this to Susan because I wanted this treasure. But in doing so, I destroyed it instead.
It sounds like poetic justice, doesn't it?